I'm Corey Arp. I'm a volunteer here at the Leet Farmstead, and right now we're sitting inside of our barn. This is actually what would have been the horse side of the barn. All the horses that they had here would have been taken in during the day, got ready, brushed down, fed, ready to go, harnessed up for the work ahead. This is a 1915 barn, so all the work done on this farm was going to be done by horsepower. Or some farms in Iowa would have been done by mule, but this farm in particular was horsepower. Part of the daily routine would have been coming into the barn, brushing down the horses, feeding them their hay. Hay and oats are going to be their main food that they're going to use on this farm. After they eat, get brushed down, they're going to put their harnesses on them. And we do have some tack here that's in the back. We don't have the full harness. We don't have what actually would have hooked up to the wagons, but we do have their bridles here. So their bridle, this would have just gone right over their face. This goes in their mouth. This is how you'd actually control a horse. You move back and forth. The reins, that would be back with the farmer. That's how you're going to move, get the horse to go back, left, right, back, forward. That's how horses move. So, but typical farms of this time period, they're going to be growing three main crops. Your hay, of course. Horses alone can eat 50 pounds of hay a day, but then you're also going to have typically you're going to have cattle, you're going to have sheep, maybe possibly on this farm, but you're going to be this time of year in the summertime. A lot of their focus is growing that hay. As you get closer to August, they're going to start harvesting the oats, putting them into bundles, letting them dry in the field. Then they're going to be throwing them into the threshing machine later on at the end of August. So a lot of work in the summertime. Pretty much what you're doing in the summertime is you're working to have enough food for the winter times. So one other thing I'd like to point out here is this contraption. This is very untypical for most Iowa barns at this time period. What it actually is it's a way of handling your manure. So when we go to the other side to the cattle, to the milking parlor, you'll notice it's over there. So what they would have done is they had a big cart, or you'll see it over there, loaded that up with manure, would have gone to the outside, and then you dump it onto your manure spreader. So instead of fertilizer that we have now, all the chemical fertilizer, they were just using straight manure fertilizer, which worked just fine for their farms. Some other things I wanted to point out here is we also have some single trees. This is what would have been hooked up to a wagon, and then this is what the horses would have actually been pulled on. This would have connected to the harnesses, and then this is how they're actually going to be moving those implements through the field. So when they're moving the wagons, that's what's connected to it. We don't have a good example of a double tree here. We just have some single trees, but that's kind of an idea how they would have worked, or how that would have gone through the fields. So that's just one example. As you go through this barn, you'll also see some bunks. That's where the hay would have been put into. Hay and the oats would have been put into. You're also going to see some compartments in here, in the kind of in the middle. What that's going to house is that's probably going to be where most of the oats are going to be. Your oats, maybe some rye if you're growing rye on the farm, but that's purely out of ease to use. So it's right in the middle, so that way you can get the oats to the horses, you can get the oats to the cattle. It's right in the middle, so you don't have to be hauling anything too far away. In the summer, or after you've threshed the oats, what they would have done, they would have, in this barn in particular, they would have gone right through the alleyway, just dumped the oats into the barn, or dumped them into the doors. So different barns have different functions. This is actually it's a different type of barn than what's typical on Iowa farms, and that's very common for this whole farmstead. This farmstead is actually kind of atypical for farmsteads around 1950. And this farmer, when Leet and Hassler were building this farmstead up, they had a little bit more money than most guys were used to. And you can see that in the house, it's fancier. You can see that in the barn, it's bigger, made of concrete. A lot of barns are going to be just mainly made of wood. A lot of houses on farms are typically going to be I-frames. They call them I-frames, or T-frames. T-frames because if you look at them from the top, they're actually they look like a T, but they call them I-frames because they're pretty common in Iowa, Indiana, and Illinois. So in the Corn Belt regions, but so this farmstead is pretty atypical. A lot more money that they were able to use, mainly because I think Mr. Leet was a banker, or his father was a banker, so he had a little bit more money to play with. So this farm in particular is just a little bit different than most farms. The thresher's, the thresher's right outside. It's what you'll see on the north side of the barn here, and that's this is an example of about a 1915 to 1920, 1930 thresher. So this is very good for the time period. What it's actually, it's run off of steam power. So what they would have done is a lot of times the farmers in the community or in the neighborhood would go together and buy the threshing machine and the steam engine, because they're a big cost. So they call them threshing rings. So they go in, they do all the threshing. The threshing machine's actually hooked up to the steam-powered tractor by belts that just kind of pull or get everything to move through there. And when the steam-powered engine's going, it's kind of amazing. And when it's hooked up to the threshing machine, there's really nothing like it. If you ever have a chance to go to a threshing show, it's kind of amazing. But that's how they would have harvested the oats. And it would have been a neighborhood deal, not just one farmer helping another, but 5 or 6, 7 farmers. You're going to go through do everybody's oats. That way it gets done. And the greatest part about it, even though it's hot, sticky, it's always in the hottest part of the year, but they always talked about how great the meals were, because the wives always tried to outdo themselves with their big threshing meals. And you still hear about those today sometimes from those old guys that did the threshings in the 1950s. So that's some of those things that those people remember.